and broadcasting to my YouTube channel too, because I wasn't sure. And
No, that's fine. No,
I typically don't do that, but I wanted people to be able to see it if they needed
no,
to.
you're good. You're good.
Okay, and we're hot. Let me get some share around music going here, and then we'll roll the intro. Okay. Yeah, I see you grinning, Kenny. I know what you're grinning about. I ain't having any of that. Yeah, forget it. Yeah, you bet. But we're going to roll intro now. Hello, friends, fans, and loyal followers. Thanks for tuning in, man. Fun topic tonight. The wounded mind, decoding, it should say wounded deer psychology, something Kenny's been doing some research on and floated it by me a couple of weeks ago. But so we're going to put it together, but I want to manage. I want to just manage some expectations. Trackers put a lot of heart and soul and effort into what we do, and organization members put a lot of heart and soul and effort into what they do, and we do it because we're passionate about what we do. But it also can be a little taxing, and it's a labor of love. I mean, let's not confuse the matter, but we're also not going to pretend it can't be a little taxing. So, just in the interest of good mental and emotional health, we're gonna manage this duration of this stream, and we're going to get to the heart of the matter. We're going to talk about it. We're going to engage in the comments and questions like we always do, and because that is one of our favorite parts of the whole engagement. But for sure. But I just want to we'll probably be about an hour long, so you guys can plan accordingly. But don't let that prohibit you from engaging, please, because that's what makes the world go round. So
yeah, and we're not going to just cut you off completely.
No, good heavens, no. Good heavens, no. But before we get into the topic, I like the intro music. New, yes, Brent Dale. No, actually, no. We've been doing the intro music for a while.
I think he was talking about the share around music.
The share around music, yeah, we started doing that. I don't know, 3-4 weeks ago or something. I started playing share around music. Joe Cefalou, by the way, if anybody's interested, share around music is called Crop Circles, and the roll intro is called Blackie Red. Look Joe Cefalou up, an independent artist. But anyway, before we roll into the topic of the hour, let's get the plugs in for the events like we always do. We got Michigan coming up the end of the month, June 28th. Let's call it June 27th now. We did add another half a day on Friday with Garmin set up. That schedule is out. I posted it on Facebook, shared it around a little bit. If you're interested in seeing the Michigan event schedule, let me know. I'll send it to you. But I'll be bombarding everybody's inboxes with reminders if you're interested.
Yeah, and that Friday night Garmin setup will turn into kind of a sit around talk tracking.
Yeah, just to try to keep around, man. Yeah, that's some of the best stuff too. But we do have some business after that, Kenny, because we've got a started test and a finished test that we're going to run that night with crowd participation. We got to set up. Right. You got to run the started to set up the elite test that we're confident is going to be able to be run by somebody, and we'll see. But so Michigan events coming along pretty good. I've been working all week on my segments, and I'm really excited about it. And then we have Iowa coming up in September. We'll talk more about that as that draws near, but get that on your calendars if you're in the greater Iowa area. If you are in the greater Iowa area or anywhere between, the Atlantic and Pacific, we welcome you in Michigan too. But anyway, let's talk about the topic of the hour, Kenny. So, psychology of wounded deer.
Yeah. So, kind of my thing, I started thinking about it. I've been working on some stuff, some new research, I shouldn't say new research, new to me. I'm just researching someone else's research. I'm not going to take credit for anything. But basically, recovering a wounded deer isn't just about following the blood. It's about understanding the mindset of an injured animal. Every bed, every turn, every pause tells a story. And that's something we talked about when we talked about the problem solving training for a dog is, the dog has to paint that picture and put all the pieces of the puzzle together to build that story. Yep. If you know what you're looking for, the deer will tell you exactly how it felt and where it's going. And, this is stuff that I've tracked over the years, just taking notes and putting it in logs, where the deer was hit, how far it went, where we saw beds, where we didn't, was it pushed? And we'll get into all of that. And there's been some trends, and that's what has led me to dive down this road.
Well, cool, man. I am all ears because I am anything but a deer psychologist. I can barely spell psychologist, but
yeah, I'm not a deer psychologist either. But like I said, I have many years of records. It's couple thousand, well, more than a couple thousand trails, but
several thousand trails.
Yeah.
You know me, man, I'm a sucker for this kind of thing, buddy. So, and who knows where it's going to lead in conversation. So,
yeah. So, we're going to talk about some key points, the first 10 seconds, survival programming kicking in. The pain that they're going through dictates their movement, bedding behavior, what pressure does to the mind. Does deer always go to water? That's going to be a topic, and where they go to die. So those are the things we're going to touch on tonight. I'm going to start with the first 10 seconds. The fight, flight, or freeze. It's kind of what I titled it. And so upon impact, a deer will usually default to flight. I mean, if you guys hunt, or even if you don't hunt, you hear all the stories that you go on tracks. Usually the deer takes off. And so we're going to kind of talk about some hits, and typically a liver shot deer is going to bolt hard, and they're going to bed typically within the first 150 yards, and most of us don't get to see that because the deer ends up pushed almost always.
Yeah.
A long heart shot, I mean, they're just going to run until they collapse.
Yep.
A gut shot, they tend to move slower and favoring thicker areas. And but one thing you got to keep in mind, especially during the rut, and we've talked about the vitamin K1 and K2 levels being elevated, and the endorphins, which is basically a built-in painkiller for them. It can delay the symptoms of what they feel.
Yes.
So they may run clean before they crash. They may take off there, or they may, sometimes you'll see them pounce off like with their tail up, and they're hit. I found many where people thought they missed because the tail was up.
And the flag went up. Yeah. Yep.
And he's probably not watching, but I tracked a deer for one guy. He calls me. He's like, man, the deer blew all the way out, but I know I hit. And I said, well, we'll give it a shot. I've tracked for this guy quite a bit. And sure enough, we got that deer. And he said it blew nonstop. And it was that deer. It started running off. It stopped. I believe he said it was around 40 yards. Looked back at him, kept blowing, ran off blowing, and we ended up getting it.
Wow. What was it shot with? You remember?
Believe that one. Believe it was a muzzleloader.
Muzzleloader.
I remember right.
Big boom. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I've never had that, a deer blowing after the shot.
Yeah, it's
wow.
So I've had some interesting tracks for this gentleman. He had one he shot, it ran off, and then it turned around and came right back down the same trail with a bear behind it.
A bear?
Yeah.
Being chased by a bear?
I don't know that it was being chased, but evidently the deer went that way, and it did not want to stay that way, and it came back. The bear came walking behind it. So,
all right,
that was a fun one to work through.
I can imagine.
So even as we talk about psychology, there's still things that can happen that will affect the average routine pattern. So we'll dive into the survival programming kicks, or where it kicks in. We all know wounded deer rely on instinctual behaviors, and I don't know about you, Matt, but most people I track for think that a wounded deer is always going to go to water.
Well, that is a common stigma, I guess we'll say.
I will say this: most of them that we track are in water, but it's not because they're going to water; it's because we're tracking in swamps. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, we do find more gut shots in water than we do other wounds. And we'll kind of get into that later.
Yeah.
They will use certain terrain for concealment. It could just be a slight dip. And, I've got a funny story on that one. A friend of, a guy that I went hunting with, it was a friend of a friend, and we went to public land in Alabama, and this guy, he's special. Yeah, I'll just say that. I mean, he's a unique individual. He can come up with some wild stories.
Yeah.
And I shot a pretty good 10-point that evening, and he texted us like, "Hey, when are you coming to get us?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm trying to load this deer up." Shot a 10-point. He said, "Me too."
Okay.
Like, okay. So we go to pick him up, and he's like, I said, we're gonna go get you. No, it's still alive. And hey, Chagrath. Anyways, he says I think it's still alive. We're gonna track it in the morning.
Okay.
So they were like, "Hey, let's go to dinner. Let's go get a steak. Celebrate you shooting that buck." And we go to dinner, and he starts telling us this story. My buddy says, "So tell us about your shot." He said, "Well, I shot it, and it fell over. It went straight on its back, and all four legs were sticking straight up in the air."
Oh yeah.
I was like, "Oh boy, here we go with one of these stories."
Yeah.
He says, "So I went to get out of the stand, and it made a noise, and the deer stood up, laughed at me, and ran off."
Stood up, laughed at me, bleated then, and ran off.
Yeah.
Laughed at him.
So it was laying there with and he said it laid there a while with all four legs straight up in the air.
Cartoon dead.
So I was arguing with him. I'm like, you do realize the shape of a deer and how its back is not going to, it cannot lay there on its back with all four legs up.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen.
Right.
And he was getting mad. So we go out there the next morning, and I said, well, we didn't even hunt. We were going to go get his deer. I go walking in there, and I see his stand on a pine tree that is about that big around, a climbing stand.
Okay.
And I said, "Gary, is that the tree you were hunting in?" "Well, yeah." He's like, I said, "How high up did you go?" "Oh, I was only, maybe a foot off the ground." He's like, "The tree was too small." I'm like, "Okay." And I said, "Okay, where was the deer at?" "Oh, it was right there." I said, "Where?" And he pointed. It was like 15 yards away. So when he shot it, he said it ran over about 30 yards and laid down with its legs, all four legs straight up in the air. And I was like, "All right, I got to see this."
Yeah.
So I said, "Let's go to where he was standing when you shot." Couldn't find any blood. So we walk over where this deer had supposedly laid down and it turns out, and I had to kind of eat some crow. It turns out there was like a little ditch. And the way that ditch was, that deer was laid in there and its legs were up.
Cradled right in there. Okay.
Yeah, it was cradled right in. Now, I don't know about the laughing part and running off, but we ended up calling another tracker out there. I didn't have dogs with me. We called AJ Niet, and he trailed that deer. This was peak of the rut. I think that deer had worked 13 or 14 scrapes after it had been shot. And it went, if I remember right, it was 1.8 miles when we got to that deer.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's that survival programming kicking in. But and the rut mindset where it worked.
Yeah, the rut mindset. Yeah, you talk about the psychology of a rutting deer.
Deer. Yeah. So you're talking about dips, thickets, shadow lines. A lot of times they'll circle back, loop, J hook, and when most time when they do that, they're trying to get back on their back trail because they know where they came from was safe. and what are some of the things that dictates the movements? Pain's probably the number one. You have mobility restricting wounds,
Yep.
which would be like leg, hip, spine.
Yep.
Your mobility restricting wounds are more erratic typically, with shorter bursts until you get dogs on. If you're in on-lead state, and then it could be some long bursts.
Yeah. Right.
So non-lethal flesh wounds, often continue moving until exhaustion or nightfall, which is just typical deer behavior. And then your vital hits, they typically, the movement's slow, drastically within 300 yards unless pressured. They may bolt out of there like they're shot out of a cannon, but they typically don't go far, and they're going to lay down. Again, we don't get to see it as often because people want to push it. So understanding the type of wounds, it will tell you what kind of decisions the deer is about to make. And again, these are just general because
generalizations. Sure.
Yeah, anything can go sideways, but there's definitely trends and patterns. So we'll dive into the bedding behavior. And this is something that I've really paid a lot of attention on, especially in the last, 8 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I've noticed that wounded deer will do, especially bucks, they seek isolation. Typically, even if I'm tracking it like a plantation where there's just a bunch of deer, typically a wounded buck tries to get away from the rest of the deer. I'm not sure why. I don't have that answer. And another thing, they want cover and escape routes. And where do you mostly find good cover with plenty of escape routes? Their bedding area.
Yep.
That's why I tell everyone, one thing you can bank on is they're going to try to get back to a known bedding area.
Yep.
And it's because of that reason. And another thing, deer aren't dumb. They're going to put their back to the wind and their eyes on the trail. So keep that in mind, especially if you're in an off lead or, in an off lead state where you have some baying opportunities, and where your dog jumps. If it jumps and it bays right there and holds it, one of the best strategies is to take your time. Don't go running in there and pushing it out.
Yep.
Circle around, get upwind of the deer and work your way in, just like you were hunting. I think it is Mike Lopez has a video on YouTube with him and his dog Lucy, and she was baying and he worked the wind, played it just like that. So let's talk about multiple beds. We often think of multiple beds as the deer being pushed, but that's not always the case. Just like us, if we're in pain, we get uncomfortable, discomfort, and we start moving around. But something that a lot of people doesn't think about, and I don't know that it's real important, but they will reposition for scent detection. So that's something to consider if you come to the first bed and the people say, hey, I haven't been in here, I didn't jump this thing, be ready, because it may have just moved over just a little bit, and if it's still alive, it could be they're pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
Just moving from discomfort or wind shift, and they shifted that bed. It's, again, I'm not saying this is super important, but it's good to know, because if it helps you in one time, it's worth it. So, what does pressure do to the deer's mind? I mean, I think we know this. A grid search before the dog arrives, that deer's moved. If it's not dead, they didn't find it. Typically, they pushed it and it's moved. Um, human scent. They know when you're there. They know when you're coming. Um, and the big one is it being tracked too early. That's when the deer shifts into high gear. Especially liver or gut shot. Most of the time they're gonna bed up and try to expire within a couple 100 yards if you don't push them.
Yeah. Unless it's the peak of the rut and they start chasing does again.
Right. But the big thing is we don't just lose tracks because of terrain. We lose them because someone or something disrupted the psychology of the deer. And whatever that may be, and typically it's the hunter, forced it to make a different decision than it would normally make.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
And that's when you end up a lot of times, and now that I say this, you'll probably pay more attention. But if you look like on your Garmin, what that was. If you look on your Garmin as you're going along, a lot of times there's a pattern. And all of a sudden you see that pattern change, especially after they grid search. It's probably because they jumped the deer right there. Because more often than not, that pattern continues. We talked about deer don't always go to water. Gut shots often do. And it's not because they want to drink. They're trying to get their to cool their core down.
Yeah,
and to soothe that wound.
You were setting in, yeah.
Yep. And it may be just a shallow creek, a ditch. It may not be much water at all, and here we have a lot. So like I said, almost all deer end up in water here.
Let me ask you this on the waterfront. Do you think I've heard people talk about this before in tracking discussions. Do you think that deer use water as an evasive measure?
I don't. Because obviously they know. I mean, they're like a dog. They think through their nose. I mean, they do communicate through vocalization, but they know that they're leaving a oily slick on that water. And what?
That is what they're doing.
Oh yeah. So my mindset on it has always been, water is often in a low area, and the scent will flow down into that low area, so they can smell any danger coming quicker. The other side of that is they can hear any danger coming quicker.
Yeah. I had an interesting when I was on the Outdoor Drive podcast with Trevor Berwick and Steve Mardick a year or so ago. And Steve's perspective on the water thing was, there are a couple stereotypes or whatever you want to call them that to kind of all come together there. They say his theory was you find more wounded deer in water because in downhill because they're trying to get to cover. So where is the cover? The cover is often along the water's edge. Where is the water? In the low spots. So the deer running downhill because that's where the water, because that's where the cover is, and the cover happens to be next to the water because it's in a low spot. So I don't know if there's anything to that, but it sure seems like to have a lot of reason to it anyway.
Yeah.
But I do agree with you that I don't think that deer that just got hit is bolting for water, but I think the deer that has lived for 10 hours or 8 hours and starts feeling sick, is then does make his way towards water to bed down, that gut shot or something like that. That's what I think.
Yeah. And like I said, my biggest thing, and from the stuff that I've read and studied, is that's where the scent will pull. It's more.
Well,
It's
and
more.
that makes sense
Yeah.
too. That
Yeah.
that makes sense too. I mean,
I
I
mean,
never thought
so
about
we
that.
track in a lot of swamps here.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm in water nearly every track. Our dogs do not struggle in water, and it could be over my head water, and the dogs will swim trailing that deer. So it's not to get away from coyotes. I mean, that kind of proves that point.
Yeah.
Um, maybe they think they can. I don't know. Most of our bucks here tend to bed on islands in the swamps.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so that's why I believe we find a lot of them, because they're trying to get back to that bedding area that's in the water.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Yep.
Now Randy Vick made a comment, said, I always figured a swimming deer has lost coyotes or dogs in the water before. And it may be a tactic, but it's not going to stop the dogs.
Right. Right.
Randy knows that. I mean, shoot,
Yeah.
Randy and I have found hundreds and hundreds of deer through the water. So, so final decisions, where they go to die. And this I found interesting, and every study I read was pretty much the same, that actually had some in-depth research. And looking back, it aligns with my records. Deer that know that they're dying will go downhill. If they know that they're dying and it's fatal, I'm not talking an intestinal shot, and
Yeah.
or even a gut shot. I mean, a deer that knows it's dying pretty quickly is going downhill in most cases. They will almost always choose cover, even when it's not optimal terrain. Like our deer here, I mean, they might be in a nice open pine thicket, but they're going to try to find the cover.
Mm-hmm.
And in our area, we have a lot of tie thickets, heads. They're basically swamp heads. And even though you cannot hardly walk through them, the deer go there. I mean, my dogs had stopped one. They actually had one bayed up in one of those thickets, and the deer died while the dogs were baying it. And we tried to get in there to them, and I'm telling you, this is no lie. They were 40 yards into this thicket, straight line, and we could not figure out how to get in there. I had to call the dogs out, and the hunter went back to the camp, got a chainsaw.
Blazed the trail.
Well, 45 minutes later, he had made it 15 yards. How did that buck get in there?
Lord.
I don't know. I will say this. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it, because we track in a lot of thick stuff, and we have jumped deer and watch them run down a road and dip back off the road. And you get up there and there's no opening, no hole. I'm like, how does this happen? Well, over time you get to see it. The deer will actually put their head back, and they will lay their antlers, back on their neck.
Yep.
And it's basically obviously they're not super wide, but they'll lay them back on the back of their head, and they go right through a hole that big. It's
one of my grandfather's all-time favorite hunting stories was he shot a deer that was sneaking like that. He says his horns were laid right back on his head, and his nose was straight out like that. And he was sneaking right through that swamp.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
I've had several. I tracked one for a guy. Actually, 5 minutes from my house. And we got there, and Perry Lawrence is on here. It was in Perry Lawrence's old club. In fact, we're right around the corner from the floating hat story we told y'all about.
Oh yeah.
We tracked this deer, we get in there, and the dogs just started struggling. I mean, and it was just all water, as far as you could see water. And but a bunch of little tie thickets. Anyways, finally Sam starts working it out, and then I see Xena lock in. I'm like, oh, this is, I don't know where it's at, but it's here somewhere. And at this time we were in like I guess you'd say it was probably 300-yard pond, 300-yard circle. And we were about in the middle of it. It was just a little flat pond. And I'm like, what are these dogs locked in on? And so anyways, we get up there, and I'm looking, and they're still trying to work it out. And I see the tip of the deer's nose sticking up out of the water, snorkeling. All it had was the tip of its nose up.
What the hell?
Yeah. Yeah, it was wild. And it
was still alive.
It was very much
alive, and he was just underwater with just tip of his nose up, trying to breathe, huh?
Yep.
Like the alligators when they freeze in Florida, right?
Yeah, they don't freeze.
Oh, I thought I've seen alligators frozen with their nose stuck out of the water before.
See, that's the thing. They can get cold, and I don't know how they do it, but they can get cold. It's just like snakes. They can get cold and freezing temperatures, and then when they warm back up, they're back to life. That's
crazy. Yeah.
So with that said, most of the time deer try to retrace their tracks, go to familiar areas. Some of the things you can look at, though, he says not in Florida. They ain't freezing there. They will here. They will here where I'm at. Hey, we did have snow this year.
Yeah. Yep.
We talk about all this, and is it really important for what we do? You could say I see it both ways. I think it does play a role, because when you start knowing those things and you start doing your hunter interviews and you start questioning, the reaction, cocaine ain't snow.
Cocaine ain't
snow. You can kind of put it into perspective, especially when you have a hunter that texts you and they're still in the stand.
And
you could say, hey, based on the description of what you told me, best thing you can do is ease out, because that deer's probably within 80 yards, and stuff like that.
Yep. Hey, Ralph.
Probably one of the biggest ones that people mess up on is a lung shot. They'll see lung blood, that pink frothy blood, and you get a single lung and it's going to be some pink frothy blood.
Sure can be, but it's only one.
And a lot of times hunters are bad about pushing those, and those deer can go a long ways.
Well, they can live in Norton. Yeah.
But typically, when you start restricting that airflow, they're not going to go more than, on average, 100 yards and bed up. So if you have pink frothy blood, you jump that deer, you better back out. Come back the next morning.
Yeah, and then hope, because it still may not be dead on a single lung. But I wanted to comment on, and I don't want to interrupt your flow here, but
no, you're good.
You talked about, it is knowing these tendencies and these generalizations, if you will, of the deer psychology. Does it really matter for what we do? And my take on that is, well, it can, and it really depends on whether you want to be a tracker or a dog follower,
Right.
because it's just all part of it. It's all part of the puzzle. It's all part of the acumen, how it all fits together. And can the dogs tell us a whole lot? They most absolutely can and do. But there are times when the handler has to do some thinking. They have to do some reasonable deductions. We can follow the dog, and we will, and we do. But if we can understand some of the tendencies of wounded deer, you can start to put things together when the trail gets tougher. You're in that unsolvable scent pool, or who knows what. The easy tracks are the easy tracks, but the hard tracks, that's when you need to call on all of the whole depth of your knowledge. And the broader your knowledge, the more resources you have to pull from. So soaking things up and understanding as much as you can to a reasonable depth. I mean, we're all not going to be PhD expertise on everything, but that's why, I'm intrigued by the man trailing world, to rabbit trail a little bit. I'm intrigued by the man trailing world. Although it's different, there are parallels, and there may be something there that you can extract and apply to our world. And that's why we're going to get Jeff Shetler on, because I think it's good it rounds you out as a handler and as a deer tracker. Let's not just limit ourselves to dog handlers. We are deer trackers, is what most of us think aspire to be. And that requires more than just following dog. As much as we say, trust your dog, train your dog, the dog will tell us. All of that is still valid. All of that still matters. But to be as complete as you can, this type of stuff matters too.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell another quick story, and I know Randy's tuned in here and he'll remember this one. And I've told this story a bunch, but I'm going to leave some of the aspects out.
Yeah.
We were tracking a deer. Randy called me. Reba had gotten overheated, and I got there. If I remember right, Randy took it 500, 550 yards, something like that. And we got there, and my dog struggled a little bit to even get to where Reba was. It was hot that day. We finally got there. The dog's locked in. And it's starting to get a little closer to the dark, and we went a few hundred yards more. And the kid's dad, he was ready to, or he wanted to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of pulled Randy off to the side, and I showed Randy my handheld. I said, "Hey, this trail, we're going along like this, and the trail's steadily hooking."
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll tell you what happened. I need to back up. As we were walking to the shot site, we got in the food plot. My dogs were up ahead of us. And all of a sudden they were going along, and I seen their bodies snap, turn right, and they took off, and they opened up, bar, 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 bar. And Randy said, "They're on the wrong deer." And, I assumed so, because he'd already taken it 550 yards. And so I start toning them, and they're not returning. And I told Randy, I said, "I think that's the deer." I said, "They're not wanting to come back." And he's like, "There's no way." And I, in my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, you're right, but I know my dogs. So anyways, I had to shock them, get them come back. And we put them on the trail. Like I said, we finally get to where Randy had pulled Reba out when she overheated, and went another few hundred yards. It was a young boy. The hunter's dad called it. And I pulled Randy to the side. And I said, "You see this, Randy?" I said, "Here's the food plot. This whole time we're going like this, and we're starting to hook."
Yeah.
And I told Randy, I said, "Just, I want to go back and check where I pulled those dogs off, where I called them back." But I could tell that the hunter's dad was not, he didn't want any part of that. So basically I took the lead. I said, "Hey, I got a GPS. I'll show us the quickest way out of here." But really what I was doing was taking us to where I called those dogs off.
Okay. Yeah.
And as we're going along, um, it was which one? It was Sam. It was either Sam or one of the two dogs cut off to the right in this cutover. And it was Sam. And Xena, she kept going in front of us. Well, Sam's going this way and hooking this way, and Xena's coming like this and coming this way. And so we get up there and I'm trying to look for blood. And about that time, Sam jumps the deer and runs it right towards us, right into where Xena was, runs it past us, and we ended up getting that deer.
Oh, cool.
But watching those patterns, even though this is where I'm going with this, is we know that deer was shot in the food plot. If that was the deer right away, then I'm trying to put all this puzzle together in my head. I was thinking, if that's the deer that they did jump from the beginning, it's making this loop and trying to get right back there again. So that was my mindset. So there's a very good chance that where I called him off, we're looping right back to. And sure enough, it paid off. So that's an example of paying attention to this stuff that can be a difference between putting a deer on the tailgate or not.
Yeah, I mean, I had a similar thing happen in terms of the deer looping back, and I went back the next day, and I think we jumped it the night before, but I didn't know that. I was suspicious of it. Went back the next day, started at the hit site, and the dog never put her nose on the ground. She air scented it 300 yards to where we walked within 3 feet of the night before, and the deer wasn't there. Because it took this big loop, went all the way back, and we found it where there were several beds that the night before in the tall grass. It was going right back to where the scene of the crime.
Oh yeah, and that's what I tell. That's my theory is they're always going to try to get back to a bedding area. They may not be able to make it there, but that's their goal.
Yep, they're going home, wherever home is for them.
Yep. See, and then we talked about this before. I put this little line here. I've been kind of doing these little one-liners here lately on something I'm working on.
Yep.
So a tracker isn't just reading sign; they're profiling a wounded animal's behavior under stress. And I know, kind of getting into comments here, but I seen someone made the comment about this is the first time a deer's ever died.
Yeah.
Kind of right, but I will say there's definitely some patterns if you track it long enough.
Well, let's pull Mark Maniaci's comment up. Mark says, "I'm all about trends and patterns of wounded deer. Of course, I've immersed myself into all the theories. At this point, I've let most of it all go. The biggest thing to me is this is the first time the deer has ever died. I'm trusting the dog and reading. Of course, all the understanding of scent theory and flow is largely important. With seeing deer, do not normal things after being wounded. I have simply let it go and has seemed to help us as a team." Yeah. So I guess my comment to that, I want your comment too, Kenny. My comment to that is, Mark, you're right. If the dog is doing what the dog should be doing, let the dog do what the dog is doing. And don't insert yourself. But my comment about the acumen and thinking through is when that track gets tough, and maybe you have to do a little bit of thinking. But I'm with you, man. For the most part, Mark, if I'm inserting myself, it's generally bad. But we do restarts and stuff. But but by and large, if the dog is doing the thing, let the dog do the thing.
And I agree with that completely. But again, like you're saying, Matt, the difference comes in is when that dog needs help and know these things, and you kind of learn some of the familiar patterns, and you can sometimes get out of a troubled spot and get in the right direction just by knowing these typical patterns.
Yeah, understanding some tendencies. Yeah. Good comment, Mark. Thank you. Let's see. We'll pull up Perry's. Perry had one last year, 6 hours when I put on a real thick palmetto. The jet went 150 yards and stopped. He wouldn't move, winding hard. Hunter was shining light for 5 minutes. I seen something under the palmettos 5 yards away. Big buck buried himself under them. Took 20 minutes to drag it from under them. I told Hunter we were near it because the jet was winding hard, but they were so thick, couldn't even get in them. Yeah, they like to bury themselves in all kinds of dense and thick covers.
Oh yeah.
Yep. Let's grab Gene's here, Kenny. Well, then we had one shot close to Memphis, and this deer went through the neighborhood. When we got close, that blippity blank beep ran and jumped in the sewer pond. I was ready to quit tracking that day. Gene, I'm right there with you. You know what I would do at that point? I would point. Right there's your deer, Hunter. Yeah. We're there to find the deer, not salvage it.
I got a similar story to that one. There's a river in our town. It's the only river that is actually deemed an industrial river, where the paper mill has dumped into its effluent into it for 50 plus years, and it's known to be polluted. Okay. It's clean. It's a lot cleaner now, but anyways, we tracked this deer, and the dogs jumped there. The dogs run by us, and we never see a deer. And they're barking. I'm like, no, they don't bark unless they're looking at the deer. They ran by us, nothing. Ran back by us within like 20 feet, nothing. I'm like, what the heck? And that guy's like, you dogs just out here just running around or what? I'm like, no, they're on that deer. I promise you. I said, I don't know how we're not seeing that deer. About that time, the deer hits the river, and we heard it jump in the river. And we go running over there, and now the deer's coming back at us, comes up on the bank, sees us go back across the river, hits the other side, comes back, and it was just going back and forth across this river. Okay. It wasn't real wide right there, maybe 100 feet.
Okay.
So I told the hunter, I said, hey, when it gets up on the bank on the other side, because every time it would go up, it would get on the bank, it would turn broadside, go down a little, and come back every time. And like I said, it did this like 6 or 7 times. And anyways, I said, when it gets over there, shoot it. When it gets up on the bank. As soon as it got one hoof on the bank, he shot it. Okay. Well, it reared up backwards and fell backwards into the river, and it was flowing pretty good. And the dogs had a hold of it. They were actually trying to pull it to the bank and couldn't. So anyways, it was, I still remember it was 28 degrees that night.
Oh,
and I was on about, what's that?
Arctic for Florida.
Yeah. I was on about, I think it was track number 7 that day. It was like midnight. And the hunter says, hey, I'll give you $50 if you'll go jump in there and get my deer. I was like, no, man, I'm not going in there. No. And so he strips down to his underwear, and he goes to get in. He's like, it's way too cold. He said, I'll give you $100 to get in there and get that deer. I said, I'm not getting in there. I'm going home.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't blame you. Let's grab Mark's again because it's an intriguing comment. Can you again? I don't want to. If you have more topics you want to cover, but it says Mark Maniaci, how often do you find a passing rut buck in home bucks bedding areas? I don't know.
So I've actually seen that quite a bit. But our rut's a little different here. So that'd probably be a better question for someone in a not so densely populated area, because we do see it quite a bit here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting, Mark. I don't know. I mean, I've always subscribed to the theory that the traveling buck is when wounded trying to get back to his home range. Whether he makes it or not, who knows? You know, does he bed in a different buck's home range bedding area? I'd imagine it happens at times if that's the cover on his way to his home range. But I don't know. Good question, buddy.
Yeah. So Calvin's question was exactly what I was going to hit on. If you want to read that. You want me to read it?
Yeah, go ahead.
So Calvin Dennis says, understanding a deer's potential behavior when wounded also gives you credit toward the hunter. Being confident and applying logical thinking from previous experiences allows you to provide the hunter a reasonable explanation. Will never be 100% correct, nor will the dog's track ever be 100%. Being educated makes you more legit. A tracking team is a whole package. Love the conversation tonight.
Yeah.
And that's why I dive so deep into some of this stuff.
Yep.
When you can start putting the picture together for the hunter before you even get there, just over the phone, I'll have hunters that are iffy as to whether they're going to even track the deer, and they just happen to call, and I don't charge, so it's not even about the money.
Right.
They start thinking, oh, well, it's rut. Do I want a dog out here? They start second guessing stuff, and I'll start diving into the science, like scent theory and, dissipation, and basically just me knowing that information makes them feel more comfortable and confident in me, and being confident that I am right, that our scent will be dissipated before their next hunt.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times that's gotten me a track that probably the people wouldn't have done it.
Otherwise, they wouldn't have. Yeah, there's a great misconception, and it's just that a misconception because people just don't know, the impact that dogs have in the deer woods. And what I tell people is that there's canines traveling in your woods every day.
Yep.
And you're still seeing deer. There's video after video after video out there of trail cam video or something of a dog running by a bedded buck, and the bedded buck sitting there watching the deer, or watching the dog. I mean, so it does not have as big of an impact as many people seem to think. Will it bump the deer out of that immediate area for an hour or so? Probably. Will it forever or a week or so? No. I mean, why if that were, why do we constantly get wounded deer back on camera? I mean, that deer had an arrow through its backstrap or its shoulder, and it still came back in front of the camera you just shot it out of.
Yeah.
So they don't abandon the area just because a coyote type thing came through the area.
No, and I got another story on that one. Jason Bell called me one night to back him up in Fargo, Georgia, and so he's walking me through it, and he's like, "Man, I think the deer's dead." I was like, "Jason, if your dog stopped on it, that deer ain't dead." And we had trained Jason's dogs, but he wanted a second opinion, so I drove there. And luckily I was at my hunting camp, so I was a lot closer.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, I drove the whatever hour or so that it took to get there just to give him and the hunter some closure. So they had already been in there tracking, 2 guys, a dog, a couple dogs. And first the guy grid searched, then he brought in Jason and the dog. And then here I come with 2 dogs, and we jumped the deer. We ran it pretty good ways. I think it was 900 something yards. And I told Jason, I said, "Hey, this thing hasn't stopped to bay one time in 900 yards. And your dog's already said that, hey, we're not getting it.
Yep.
Let's call it." And Hunter was like, I agree. And so I said, why don't we hit this road and walk back instead of walking through all that thick stuff? So we did. And we get about halfway back to the truck, and the guy's trail camera goes off. That deer circled back and was eating under the feeder that we originally started the track on.
And you guys haven't even made it to the truck yet?
Nope.
Well, I guess all that running made him hungry, Kenny.
Yeah, and then another one, this is another guy I track quite a bit for. He's got some pretty big bucks for our area. He manages them very well. And I had jumped the deer, and the dogs got hot, and I kind of knew that we weren't going to get this one, but I felt like there was a chance because the dogs did get a hold of it one time. So I called my buddy James Long, and I asked him, I said, hey, will you come back me up? And I said, bring some dog power. And he did. He brought, I think, 4 or 5 dogs. So we had 6 or 7 dogs on the ground. I mean, this is what this guy wanted to do. And we can run deer with dogs here.
Yep.
In rifle season. So it's nothing questionable or against the law.
Yep.
So we dumped all the dogs out, and this deer just kept doing circles on this property. And finally, we just called it. And we loaded the dogs up, and we drove from the food plot to the guy's house. And it went it was maybe 700, 800 yards. When we got to his house, we were standing there talking to him. The trail camera went off. That buck was in that food plot. 6, 7 dogs, three people, and I was out there all day.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had one last season. Tracked it, didn't think it was, didn't find it. I didn't think it was dead. Wasn't sure where it was hit. Hunter called my buddy Brent and just said, "Hey man, just what do you, just looking for that second opinion, that validation." And Brent, he called me and said, "Hey, what do you think, Matt?" And so I told him. He said, "Okay, yeah, I agree." I got a call a couple hours later from the hunter who went back out hunting. Said, "Hey, that deer's out in the field right now that I shot him out of. He's just hitting the leg, and he came back out in the same field he was hit from." So I don't know. We're not driving deer out of the county. We're just not. We're just not.
Yep. I like Darren Miner's comment right there, and that's one.
I just followed it up. Yep.
Yeah, uneducated drone operators will use a dog will spook your deer out of the area to try to get the search.
Yeah.
And that couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah, I agree with that. And yes.
And most of that comes from Mike Yoder's marketing tactics, where he just spent thousands and thousands of dollars to down dogs. And I'll call them out. I call anyone out that I feel does us wrong.
Yeah. Let's qualify. Darren wants to qualify. Postscript. I use a drone and dogs, and Darren does. And Darren joined me on my Tales on Trails deer tracking podcast to talk about drones and dogs and try to dispel the myths and there it is. There's your drone case. Yep.
With DJI Matrice 30.
Yep. Chuck says, "I wish more hunters would watch the podcast."
Well, here's the thing. Even though hunters may not watch it, we are providing the information for you to take to those hunters when you go track for them.
That's right.
And that's why I am not a fan of turning down even what I feel may be a clean miss. Now, don't get me wrong. There are times where I have to, I guess you'd say, screen calls. When it's busy and I'm getting 20, 30 calls a day, I have to screen.
Yeah.
And
To me,
it's
that's
not really screening, it's prioritizing.
prioritizing. Yes, you have to stack them up with the highest probabilities based on the information available.
And I will say this, I don't cherry pick the easy ones. And anyone that tracks around me will tell you I don't cherry pick the easy ones. Most of the time, I'll give the easy ones away.
So wait a minute, you're not saying, yeah, I'll take this gut shot, but then putting every shoulder shot in your network chat to see if somebody wants it. You're not doing that?
Not at all.
Oh, okay.
In fact, I mean, you can ask the people that I track with a lot, that, Jason Byer, John Vaughn, Mike Alguire. I don't know if any of them are on here. I would rather take that shoulder shot or that back whack. I know it's a little crazy, but I like the challenge of the tough tracks.
Well, yeah, and you are set up and geared for that type of track. You know.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I do like some easy tracks.
No, no. That's what I'm getting at. But you have the team that can accommodate that kind of track. Most of us in the North do not, and it's most of us in the North are hooked up,
right.
And it's just really, really hard to do. But
there again, even then, I like those tougher tracks, even when I have to be on lead.
No, I get it, man. Yeah,
it's just I tend to get bored with a dog when they get well seasoned.
You've said that before.
I
said you prefer a younger dog just for the challenge of getting them seasoned.
Yeah, and it's but what I try to do, and what I try to tell everyone to do, is if you have to refer tracks out or screen per se, I always do it by distance and the wait time. If I have a double long shot and it's an hour from my house, but I have 10 other calls that's within an hour, and there's someone else that I can give that to that's closer, I give it to them.
Sure. Oh, sure. Yeah.
It's the right thing to do. Respecting boundaries. Not that there's really boundaries, but that respect goes a long ways. And I know it's kind of off topic.
It's a courtesy. I was going to say professional courtesy, and I guess we could. It's a courtesy. It's not a requirement. Nobody owns it. Nobody owns territories, but it's a courtesy.
Nope. So something to consider, and this is, kind of I guess you'd say, closing message I put in here, and we'll hit some comments and stuff, but not saying that I'm ending it, but this is what I put together.
Yeah.
The best trackers don't just follow the trail. They think like the deer. They understand what pain does to movement, what fear does to decision-making, and how pressure changes everything. If you want to recover more deer, start asking yourself why that deer made that move it did. And you'll be surprised at how often the trail starts to make more sense.
Yeah.
And that story that I told, about the one where we circled back around, that's a prime example. And you tie that in with scent theory and, the science of scent and the movement of scent, and you put all that into perspective along with this, you can really paint a good picture.
Yep, you sure can. And that takes time though, what you just said. I think we need to be a little careful, and I don't think people should focus on think like a wounded deer. That's part of it, because boy, that can get you in trouble, and you can outsmart yourself if that's the only piece you focus on. But think like a wounded deer, and then start applying it to the experience you've accumulated. If you're paying attention to those types of details, if you're really becoming a student of the track and looking at understanding what your Garmin or your Onyx or whatever is telling you as you're moving, and then applying all of that. Again, I keep calling it the acumen, how all of the pieces fit together, the tracking acumen. It can all tie together, you know, and the greater exposure you have, and the greater, you know, the more open your mind, I think the more rounded of a deer tracker you're going to be, and not just a dog follower. But, you know, I do want to, you know, back to Mark's point, if the dog's doing dog things, let the dog do it.
Yeah, but here's another example of how all this can come into play. And this is something I do on every track that maybe others don't, maybe you do and don't realize it. When I get there and I see where we're at and I see the shot site, I look at the satellite imagery and I start looking. I say, okay, well, here's a swamp head here, here's a swamp head here. And I know typically the wounded deer is going to get to one of those swamp heads.
Yep.
So then before I even open that dog box or cut that dog loose or start that trail, I've already got a plan in place of what I'm predicting may happen and how we can combat that if it does before I even put that dog on the trail.
Yeah. Yeah. But you're not letting that drive the track to where you start influencing the dog to force them to what you think.
No. Now, what I will do, though, I will, if the dog starts struggling and just,
yes,
you know, something goes wonky, I will go to those areas. I'll start working that direction and possibly pick it back up. And that works a lot of times.
But see, that's my point, though, Kenny. You employed the tactic when it needed to be employed, and you didn't start out with a predetermined plan of, okay, I got to force my dog over here because that's where I think it went. You let the dog do dog things first, and then when it went sour, you applied the logic based on your experience, based on the topo, based on the deer psych, and all of that. That's when you applied the logic.
Right.
Or, you know, so, yeah, man, see, I get fired up about this stuff.
And, you know, a lot of you guys may do that and don't even realize it.
Oh, I think so. I mean, my friend Daryl, you know, I had a track last year, the Liberty Legend. You've heard me talk about it before. That was this deer, as everybody knew him as the Liberty Legend. We tracked him. He was leg hit. We figured out he was leg hit. There were a million beds. There was snow. We backed out, or I deduced he was probably leg hit. Backed out. I was going to go back the next day because he wasn't going to live. You know, he would have died in time. They ended up getting him without us because they could track him. But, you know, I was going to have Daryl come down. He's an hour or so north of me. I was going to have him come down because he was more accustomed to, you know, rundowns. You know, I'm just not. You know, my bloodhound's not a rundown dog. We're just, and I just wasn't comfortable with it. So Daryl was going to come down. So I sent him a screenshot of the Onyx, of the line, you know, and where the dog was and everything. And then he marked it up and sent it back to me. And what he did was drew a line of the path that he figured that deer took based on, you know, the satellite imagery. And sure as hell, that's where they found the deer. And in all likelihood, it took the very path that Daryl outlined, just based on the line that had emerged and the direction it was heading, and the terrain features and stuff ahead of where it was going. So, and it was absolutely the case. So yeah, you can do that. I don't know if I'm that good at it, but people can. I've heard more than one.
You definitely put it all together.
Yeah, maybe so.
But with that said, you've got a lot of people out here with a lot of years of experience that's more than willing to help out and give you this knowledge without having to learn it all the hard way.
Let's grab Jeans. because this is an interesting topic, and I think it varies by region. I notice some of y'all are seeing your dogs while on tracks. I like to let mine get out of sight and ease behind her. I feel like if I'm walking closely behind my dog, I can force them to miss something by making them feel like I'm pushing them.
Well, most of the time my dogs are out of sight, but I follow them step for step. And I will say this, I know my dogs. I know when to move forward, when not to move forward. So I'm not pushing them.
Yeah.
Now I push them when they need to be pushed. I'll say that, but you work off lead with some cur dogs. They're not going to be in your sight all the time.
Yeah. So
most of the time when I'm telling you a story about being in sight, most of the time it's, we're close to the deer. They're working out that end of the trail scent pool where all that scent's pulled up, and I can make up some ground getting into them while they're sorting that out.
Yeah. So I'll comment on it from one whose dog sometimes is within sight distance and other times not. And we have this discussion a lot here in Michigan amongst my tracking circles and tracking friends here in Michigan, because we are off lead, the only northern off lead state. And most of us, my dog typically works, I'll say 40 to 70 yards out in front of me. And the way I approach this is, if she's moving, I'm moving in a line. If she's circling, I stop. Anytime my dog is facing me, whether she's moving or not, I do not move, because I don't want to influence her decision making. Certainly if she's walking towards me, I'm absolutely not moving. But if she just turns and faces me, I stop. If she turns left and right, doing anything but moving in a direction consecutively, I am not moving. I'm standing there letting her make her own decisions and doing everything I can to not influence them. And what we're finding here in Michigan, most of us, our dogs were trained on, tractor on lead for years, and we had to, so that's what they're accustomed to. They're accustomed to that, that 30-foot range. So a lot of times, we converts, our dogs don't get that far out in front of us. But I think that also comes from the training tracks, knowing how close your dog is comfortable with, and how close is pushing your dog. But if you're in tune with it, I don't think it's a big deal. I haven't noticed it to be anyway. I like to be able to see my dog, but I don't worry about it if I can't, because I'm comfortable enough with the Garmin that I can tell what she's doing, and I'm getting better at it.
I like not seeing mine because I know that they're locked in and that they're on a good trail and they're not struggling.
Yeah. See, it's just and some of that, Kenny, do you think some of that's breed tendencies? Those
100%.
My bloodhound, she darn sure will. If she's feeling good about herself, she will go, and she does not care about me, and I don't want her to care about me. And the better she feels, the more she goes, But just I like to be able to see her if I can, but I don't worry about it if I can't.
Yeah, and even if they get out, 600, 700, 800 yards ahead of me, unless I think that deer's alive and there's a risk of them jumping it and getting into a bay situation, potentially a catch, and that I feel like they could get hurt. Or sometimes when I like to keep them close is when we're in a high gator infested area.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And even then there's a swamp not too far from here that Randy and I no longer go to, that Jason Bell can have every track there he wants, and Ben Bruce, and that Okefenokee swamp is That's a bad place with gators. But there are times where I want them to work closer. And so I do have that ability. I have trained that into them where I can keep them closer and them still work and not lose that drive.
Yeah. Yep, for sure. Well, cool.
Eugene's comment.
Let's see. I don't even know. Wait, what? How my great grandfather can walk faster than those? So you have an excuse. Thank you. That's funny. Oh man, mine can be a little rangy at times.
My old bloodhound buddy is real rangy.
Yeah, I don't have a big old. She's under 100 pounds, and she's agile enough. She's in pretty good shape. She's kind of mad at my vet though, because my vet said that she was 98 pounds, and my vet said that she would like to see her at 92 pounds. So I had to cut back on her food, and my dog got mad. So I told her it was the vet's fault. Yeah, see, you guys, Kenny, you guys and your freaking snakes. Okay, yeah, I'm with Kayla. Kayla, thank you.
You must have been reading my mind, because look what I'm fixing to try to share on the screen.
All right, I'm looking. I'm waiting.
Oh, there was an issue with the file. What? Hang on. Try this one more time.
Yeah, Kayla. Actually, I don't even want to belt her wallet out of that thing. I want. Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm trying to share, but for some reason it's not working.
Uh-oh.
Can you share it, Matt?
That picture that you sent?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I was trying to share it on the screen, but it won't. Maybe if I try here.
Yeah. Let me hold on.
Another way.
Yeah.
Still not working.
Hold on. I'll get it.
So John Vaughn got that tonight while working dogs.
Was it dead?
Oh, no.
No. What do you mean he got that? He got that picture. That's what you mean, right?
Well, he got the snake.
No. What do you mean he got the snake?
Yeah, he got the snake. So I can take it to Michigan.
Bull crap.
We have some finish tests to run.
You're darn right we do. And I have all the distractions you're going to need in my freezer and along the roads in my neighborhood. Hold on a second, buddy. Let me see. Download that dang thing. Bear with us, folks. I'm going to show you what Kenny is not going to bring to Michigan.
See what that bloodhound does when it comes across it.
Yeah, well, it's going to bite you right in the ass, because all I'm going to train on for the next 2.5 weeks is biting Kenny when a snake is around.
Oh, yeah. Live trap that skunk, Terry. We'll put that on Matt's line.
Forget it.
Right on the trail.
There we go.
Oh, there
you go, people.
Oh, yeah.
This is, let me just go ahead and do a solo layout here so everybody can get the full screen layout. There you go. This is, I don't know what the hell this is, but it ain't coming to Michigan. I can freaking tell you. Look at this shit. Look at that thing. How long is that thing?
I don't know. I didn't ask him. Probably looks like probably 5 feet.
That's what I was figuring. 5 foot or so.
Yeah,
That
probably.
what kind of freaking rattlesnake is it?
Eastern Diamondback.
Eastern Diamondback. There's his rattle right there. Good knit. Yeah, you know what? I don't think you're allowed to transport them. So if I find that sucker on my trail, I just might have to report you.
You can't transport them alive.
And it's probably
without a
illegal.
license.
Oh, well, you already said it's alive.
Well, no, it's not alive anymore.
Oh, for God's sakes. So what is the, in all seriousness, what is the, is there, what the hell here? Here we go. Is there, regulations on those snakes? I mean, are you allowed, can you hunt them? Can you kill them? Are they a nuisance? What are they? Never mind. Never mind.
You can. No, you can.
Yeah.
Especially when it's coming after your dog on a trail.
Oh, well, of course.
Yeah,
I got a skunk in my backyard.
Some states you're not allowed to. In Florida, there is no hunting season for them.
Okay.
Now you obviously can't kill any endangered ones, but
yeah, okay. Brent Dale asked, "Do you guys do snake avoidance training with your dogs?" Not in Michigan, Brent.
I have, yes, and we know how to do it ourselves. That's why we get those snakes.
And I imagine you get a fair amount of snakes in Kansas, Brent? Question mark. Let's see. Reptiles can bite on any day that ends in Y. Yes, Gene, they can.
I'll tell you a funny story. This isn't this, but one of my guys on my crew in the landscape company, I show up to the job site, check on the guy, see how things are going, and guy, he didn't speak any English, and his buddy, they're basically from Mexican Indians, so they spoke a different language.
Okay.
And I could understand a little bit of it. I started learning it. Anyways, I could tell he was trying to tell me that one of the guys got bit by a snake. And so we get over there, and the guys, I mean, I see the bite marks on his hands, and I could tell it was fairly decent sized snake. So I go looking for it, and it was a diamondback, and it bit him right there. He was trimming hedges, and it was in the hedges and struck him as he was coming across the hedge trimmer.
Oh my gosh.
And I picked the snake up thinking it was dead. I picked it up, I put it in the back of the golf cart, and so then we get back to the shop. We're waiting for the ambulance to come, and next thing I know, the snake is coiled up, rattling.
Oh
I'm
my
like,
God.
holy crap! So I grabbed a machete, I cut its head off. Even after its head was cut off, it was striking at us with no head, coiled up. It would coil up like that, just with its cut off nub, just striking at us. And then over there in the back of the golf cart, that snake's head its mouth was sitting there doing like this, just trying to bite.
Weirdest freaking thing. That yeah. I think a headless snake is creepier than a headed snake. Good Lord.
Yeah, but as far as I know Florida, you can harvest them. I mean, okay. One of my son's friends, he even eats moccasins. I'm not going to try that, but
yeah,
pretty sure Georgia you can too.
I don't know. I'm glad the only thing I got to worry about is a skunk. Coyotes. I don't have to worry about coyotes because they're not going to attack us. But Randy Vick says you can take unalive venomous snakes in Georgia and Florida. Absolutely no way, Calvin says. Brentdale, don't really have many snakes, but we do have them, and they seem to be becoming more plentiful. Well, then you're doing something wrong. If you're breeding snakes, Brent, better get. I don't know what eats snakes. Rattlesnake is good eating. Thanks, Perry. I'll never know.
Wants to bring you some?
I'll never know. I have tried octopus once, though.
Oh, yeah, it's good.
It was weird. I've had gator. That's okay. You know, I don't know if I'd try. I'd probably try rattlesnake if it was. I don't know if I would or not. I don't. No.
I can bring you some. We have some fresh.
Nope. No, you don't. You don't have any room in your car.
We have like a 6.5 footer in the freezer, don't we, Brandy? Rattlesnake. Yeah, she said there should be about a 6.5 footer in the freezer.
Nope. Put that on Daryl's line. Kelly York. I don't know about anyone else, but I'm not calling and asking if I can unalive him. I just asked for forgiveness. All right, buddy. We're an hour and a half. I do think it's probably time to wrap this one up. It was, as usual, man. It was a lot of fun, and we'll see what next week brings.
Cold Michigan weather.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about as far as the live streams and what we'll work it out. I might try to see if we can get Jeff Shetler on. He said he would come on. I just haven't reached out to him since he's back from the Netherlands. We have some ideas. You'll see on Monday whatever we come up with. So got something here.
And honestly, I don't know. We are going to be traveling on Tuesday, so I'll have to let you know where we're going to be at if I'll be in a position to be on.
Okay. Well, yeah.
We'll be heading to Michigan.
Man, that is right, isn't it? You'll be en route. Okay.
Yeah, I think we are going to leave Monday or Tuesday, Brandy. I think we're going to leave Monday. So we're in Louisiana tomorrow. We're coming back on Sunday. So I think we're going to leave Monday because we are going to stop in Kentucky and go to the Noah's Ark experience.
Yeah. I've heard that's very cool. A friend of mine at work went to it, so it was really neat.
Yeah. So, that's another thing, going to these events. I know some people are like, that's a long ways, or, I can't go to that one. It's 5 hours away. You know what? Bring your family, make it a fun mini vacation. Yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we got some of that, we should have some more registrations popped in today, Kenny, for Michigan. So we're, that, and I'm going to start pounding it again. We have some people that asked if they could pay at the door. I told them yes, not preferred, but you can. Don't want you to, but we also want you to come.
Yeah, I mean, it's much better if you can do it in advance so that we can plan. There's a lot that goes into this.
Yeah, yes, for sure.
I don't know if people realize just how much goes into it, but you now do, Matt, don't you?
Yeah, and I didn't work. I'm not working near as hard as Michael Beck did for the Pennsylvania event, but it's a lot. It's a lot, and hell, I'm here. You guys that are traveling, that's a whole nother dynamic. But I would tell you, in all sincerity, man, I genuinely appreciate you guys coming up. And everybody supporting an event that I feel like I bullied you guys into, begged you late because there were a lot of people asking, and I appreciate the support, supporting the Michigan Trackers. Like I said, in 2023, I said before, there were 241 registered. You have to register with the state of Michigan to be a tracker, and there were 241 registered. So there's a lot of people here. A lot of here. And,
and that's the thing. We try to listen to what the people want. And that's something that even going into these events and these seminars, we talked about it last night. One thing we're doing moving forward and for next year, we're going to have basically a pool of topics, and we're going to say, hey, we're going to be here. What do you guys want?
Yep.
And not only are we going to do that at events, we're going to do that on this live stream. What do you guys want? Let us know. Shoot us a message.
And on that note, want to hear about thermal scent pools and barometric pressure on how they affect the track.
Ooh, that's something I've been working on a lot the last 3 days.
Barometric pressure is an interesting one, and I know that we've discussed it. We've discussed it amongst my Michigan network friends. Just what impact does barometric pressure have, and I don't know if we really landed anywhere conclusive. I don't even know if there is anything conclusive on it, but I'm sure it does something. But
you will know soon.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you this: it definitely affects fish.
Oh, I can see it affects fish. Yeah. You want to fish on low pressure or falling pressure?
It's more on. Yeah, I mean, I like a rising pressure, but not too high.
Oh, you want okay, rising pressure. Okay. All right.
But not too high, or a falling, but not too low. It just, I don't mind it moving, but
there's a window.
There's a very small window.
Okay.
High pressure is the toughest. Bright, bluebird skies.
Yep. Okay. Perry Lawrence wants to do a finish test, he says.
Yeah, so the Georgia, the property's still not cleaned up, so we're gonna have to get that on the schedule for next year.
Yeah, the truth of the matter is just where we're at with the season, in the season, and I'm speaking for you now, Kenny, and I'm doing it very intentionally, and you know why. Any other event this year is really not an option. Because of the planning, the effort it takes, it's very taxing on people like Kenny and Kayla and the events committee because it isn't just, hey man, schedule this up, we'll knock it out. It is not what it's about. If you want a half-ass event, go ahead and do that. And you can have yourself a very nice half-assed event. I do not recommend it.
Just in the last 7 days, I've had 5 Zoom meetings plus this live, plus all the phone calls and text messages, and
it's again, guys, we're not complaining, but I do, and neither is Kenny. But there's a reality to it. Tracking is supposed to be something that we enjoy. And doing this type of thing we do enjoy, but it's not our entire lives. We all have families. And speaking of family, Brandy, if you can hear me, if Kenny brings a snake, I am holding you personally accountable to that. Do not let him pack that snake. There. It's on. I have it recorded now. I'm on record.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Calvin says she heard me.
Yeah.
Okay. It's on you, Brandy. Yeah. So Calvin says Matt thinks he's a high-class fisherman now, Kenny. I took him once and caught his limit. Now he's a professional.
I saw that.
That's exactly right, Calvin. I'm in fact, I'm going to first mate that next one. I learned what the planer boards do. I learned all kinds of stuff. Calvin first mated on that fishing trip. It was a ton of. That's the first time I've fished in a long time. It was a lot of fun.
I should have planned a fishing trip while I was up there. I may still.
It's not too late. Get with Calvin. You're gonna have to drive. If you want big water fish, you're gonna have.
You're break. I don't know. It's probably my signal, but you broke up bad.
Oh yeah. If you want big
Now
water fish, if you want big water fish, get with Calvin. He could probably hook you up as captain in his charter. Captain is really cool. You're probably booked, but especially for the time you're going to be here is when it really starts getting hot up there for salmon. I learned that too. So I am kind of, Calvin told me, so I'm kind of an expert, I want to get down there and get some of those redfish that you guys are fishing for all the time.
Yeah. The cooler months are better.
The cooler months are better? Good.
Yeah, when you get tired, when you're wore out after tracking season, and it's cold and freezing, come on down.
That's exactly what I'll plan to do then. I'll grab a couple of my Michigan buddies and we'll come down there and catch some redfish.
Yeah, we'll plan it out on a good moon where we have a strong negative tide, take that airboat and get those trap fish.
Gonna get the trap fish. Yeah, I like that. There, I've been watching you zoom around on your airboat. That crap is scary. How do you not fall into that thing? You got seatbelts in that thing or something?
No.
Okay.
You're good.
All right, buddy. I think we're there, man. We're just babbling now. But yep, guys, Michigan, Iowa, Michigan. Not this coming weekend, but the following weekend, starting Friday, if you can make it. Iowa, September 12, 13, 14, that weekend. And the lives in between. So, guys, thanks for listening. Thanks for the comments. Thanks for supporting us. And more of the good, less the bad, guys. We will talk to you soon.